Like Frosty the Snowman in the Bahamas, some faulty Xbox 360s are literally melting down while running certain games.
Microsoft is facing a potentially huge possible class action lawsuit.
One Xbox has been sent back 3 times.
The red rings are the hottest thing on some Xboxes, literally.
This is how you fix the red ring of death for Xbox. I hope you can refurbish this shit.
For years, Nintendo and Sega had been locked in a mortal battle for supremacy, known as the console wars. By undercutting Nintendo on price and targeted ads which claimed the Genesis does what Nintendo doesn't quite have the capability of doing, Sega had just barely clawed their way to the top. At the very first E3 in 1995, Sega sauntered onto the stage with an ego so big it could be seen from space. Their new console, the Saturn, was pitted against the newcomer, Sony's PlayStation. After announcing that the Saturn would be available that very same day, Sega cockily announced the price.
Our retail price is between $399 and $449.
In response, Sony's American president, Steve Race, would take the stage amidst the PlayStation reveal and say to raucous applause,
$299.
On launch, the PlayStation sold more units in 2 days than Sega did in 5 months. Sega no longer makes consoles. In the battle for console supremacy, one mistake can cost your company everything. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Sony has been dominating for years, and Nintendo was close to giving up competing on hardware like they used to and start making consoles named after bodily fluids instead. Microsoft had also splashed onto the scene with a black and green console emblazoned with a logo that looks like a sourdough loaf, which may have been intentional. Unfortunately, the gaming industry couldn't handle more than one shape-themed console, and Nintendo's GameCube was unable to capture the market. This meant that the Xbox's real competition came from Sony's PlayStation 2, following the massive success of the PlayStation 1. The PlayStation 2 had excellent brand recognition. It also had a built-in DVD player, back when those were still expensive, so you could convince your mum that even she could use the PS2 to watch, I don't know, the hot chick on DVD. The Xbox technically played DVDs too, except for the fact that you had to buy a separate remote accessory just so that it would play movies. If only there was some kind of controller that they could, bundle with the console that you could use to navigate menus on a TV. Now, crucially, the PlayStation 2 released a full year before the Xbox, giving them plenty of time to build momentum. The numbers really are quite staggering in retrospect. The PS2 had a much longer lifespan than the others, only being discontinued in 2013, and it's no surprise why. It sold like hotcake handjobs, totaling around 155 million units sold. While the Xbox managed to outsell Nintendo, which is no small feat for a newcomer. I mean, a dead rat in a gutter would have outsold the GameCube. Wow. Microsoft learned a lot from their first console and had the endless money needed to take a loss to Sony on the chin because, they're Microsoft. Even so, the Bill Gates Express wasn't content with their second place standing in the console wars. They wanted to be on top, and they knew just how they'd do it. Microsoft's next console, known only as the Xenon, the next Xbox, or the imaginatively titled Xbox 2, had to be out first. Sure, they would still attempt to make a quality product and nab some more exclusive titles to swing the public over, but the next box had to be out before the PlayStation 3. With development only starting in 2003 and a holiday 2005 release date as their goal, the team had a near impossible task ahead of them. They would have to think outside the Xbox, cut corners like it's crunch time at the Circle Factory, and pray that nothing went wrong. War Thunder? War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Square off against up to 7.88 billion real people, using over 2,000 tanks, planes, choppers, ships, and a 1986 Toyota Corolla in exciting combined arms PvP battles. From quick thrills to slower tactical campaigns, War Thunder's immersive PvP battles cater to all playstyles and experiences, but only if you're 12 years and older.
Peggy 12.
Good thing too, as the vehicles suffer real damage to their highly detailed individual components, crews, and feelings. With an X-ray mode so gory, I can't even bring myself to show you. It's like the Mortal Kombat of tanks. I'm always a huge sucker for anything customizable in video games, so I love the fact that you can tweak everything from the camos, decals, even the bushes. All new players, or those who haven't played in over 6 months, can claim a huge bonus pack for a limited time by using my link in the description. Play War Thunder now for free on PC, Mac, Linux, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. In May of 2005, Microsoft announced their next console, the Xbox 360. Not at E3, mind, but on a flashy, overproduced, painfully 2000s broadcast on MTV, hosted by Elijah Wood with musical performances by The Killers, which take up about 50% of the broadcast. There were appearances by Lil Jon, Tony Hawk, Sway, and the guys from Pimp My Ride, who pimped out an original Xbox. The best way to describe the entire thing is confused more than anything. Like, the producers at MTV were terrified that gaming was still too nerdy for their normal viewer base. So for every 10 seconds of actual console information, there's 5 minutes of musical interludes and celebrity interviews that had nothing to the reveal. The actual nerdy reveal occurred later that month at E3 2005. The team had learned a lot from the original Xbox, namely to make a controller designed for human-sized hands. The 360 had a whopping 512 megabytes of RAM, a beefy hard drive in a time when everyone was used to memory cards, and they finally figured out that DVDs could be controlled by the controller that everyone already knew how to control. This controller wouldn't be the only piece of hardware slimmed down from the previous Xbox, as the box itself also went on the Jenny Craig diet, featuring sultry curves that made it the first fuckable console. This meant that space was at a premium, forcing the poor power supply out into the cold. Temperature was also a major concern, with the components so tightly packed together. Achieving good airflow to combat overheating would be a challenge which almost cost them everything. The 360 launches and it goes ballistic. This was largely thanks to their $399 price point, the great library of launch titles, and the fact that it was just a great console. But crucially, they were also first. Not only had Microsoft's mad dash to the finish line put them ahead of the competition, Sony's own hubris all but handed the reins over to Xbox. In 1995, Sega had cockily taken the stage and announced their new console, only to be blindsided by the plucky underdog PlayStation. 10 years later, Sony cockily took to the stage to announce their new console, the PlayStation 3, stating that the next console generation doesn't start until they say so. The presentation is infamous for one reveal in particular: the price. Like Sega had done all those years ago, Sony incorrectly assumed that brand loyalty would overcome any price point and dropped the console at $499 for a 20GB model or $599 for the 60GB model. Microsoft was ecstatic. Not only was their console out a full year before Sony's, but the outrageously high price would turn away all but the most die-hard Sony fans and the US Air Force. Everything was coming up Bellhouse. But there was something lurking in the background. You see, in their mad dash to get the 360 out in time, there were a few issues with the console's design. To Microsoft, their desire to beat Sony outweighed whatever problems might arise from these flaws. Of course, had they known the actual scale of the problem, they never would have sent it out to production. At the height of the 360's popularity, one console was coming off the factory line every 4 seconds, yet only around 50% of these newly birthed consoles actually worked. For comparison, a normal production run would expect a 90 to 95% success rate. Unable to sell these broken consoles, Microsoft instead shipped them to a warehouse that they referred to as the bone pile. At one point, this bone pile had over 500,000 broken units that they hoped to one day fix and sell, if not for one problem. They had no idea what was wrong. They weren't sure if there was a fault in the manufacturing process, the design of the silly little box, or even the testing methods they use to determine if a machine works. But hey, at least the other half of them works, so that's something, right? Several months after the 360's launch, people began to report issues with their console. These sabotaged systems were afflicted with one ailment in particular, a red ring flanking the power button. These rings, usually used to indicate how many controllers are plugged in, would turn red when there was an error. Depending on the amount of rings, a different error would be represented, but the most infamous one was 3 red rings. A general hardware failure. This error indicated that something internally is so fucked that it couldn't even spit out an error message on your TV and only had the wherewithal to light up the 3 LEDs. This quickly became known as the Red Ring of Death, a play on the equally infamous blue screen of death from Microsoft's other failed game console, the PC. The name Red Ring of Death always bothered me because it's more like a 3/4 of a ring of death. Ironically, the full Red Ring of Death is actually a pretty minor issue that usually just means your AV cable isn't plugged in properly. In the early days, Microsoft swept these reports under the rug, either maliciously to protect their brand, or because they had no idea how widespread the problem was. Immediately following the console's release, they claimed that it had the industry standard failure rate of around 3 to 5%. When you ignore the literal graveyard of stillborn Xboxes piling up in some Taiwanese warehouse, this might not have been a lie. After all, it took several months of use for the Red Ring of Death to appear. But over time, it became apparent that it wasn't if your console would brick, but when. By April of 2007, around a year and a half after the 360's release, Microsoft's VP of Entertainment, Peter Moore, refused to comment on failure rates when questioned. This problem, once ominously looming in the distance, like a Twitch streamer standing across the road from a middle school, was now barreling towards them at worrying speed. And according to Microsoft, they still had no idea what the problem was. Desperate fans who didn't want to go a day without racking up that sweet gamer score would turn to the internet for a variety of homebrew remedies. Tips included wrapping your 360 in towels and then letting it run for 20 minutes. A fire extinguisher would be nice if you feel the need. You might want to use it. While this may solve the problem, it might only last a few more hours before showing the Red Ring of Death again. Buying a repair kit for $30, which would almost certainly void your warranty if it didn't work. The only homebrew solution that actually managed to fix the Red Ring of Death was posted by the YouTuber How To Basic, but even this required a lot of equipment and know-how and wasn't doable for most users. The most common remedy was to suck shit. A majority of the troubleshooting guides hit you with the "I'm sorry, but you've only got 30 days left to live" stare, informing you to contact Microsoft to have it repaired or start working double shifts to afford a PlayStation, which was also Sony's advice, by the way. The process of sending off your Xbox was hardly ideal either. After a no doubt riveting time on hold to Microsoft support, they would ship out a regular box for you to put your Xbox in, affectionately dubbed cardboard coffins by gamers. These little cards would then take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to be spat on by Xbox technicians and returned, and even then, there was no guarantee it wouldn't break again. Other fans, frustrated at Microsoft for selling a defective product, attempted their own repairs.
Hold up.
The situation was dire behind the scenes, with the bone pile only getting bigger and the cause of the Red Ring of Death still a mystery. The team had to do something. They made the difficult decision to shut down production of the Xbox 360 until they could figure out what the issue was once and for all. Of course, this only solved the problem for unborn future Xboxes, but did nothing for the millions of defective consoles that had illegally crossed the Mexican border, taking jobs from hard-working, reliable consoles. Were they to cover the repairs for those units, the cost of shipping, repairs, extending the warranties, and government-mandated apology kisses wouldn't be cheap. Their financial department estimated it would cost around $1.15 billion, but doing nothing would cost them even more, the entire Xbox brand. Peter Moore was to meet with Steve Ballmer, Microsoft's energetic CEO, and deliver him the bad news.
He said, "What's it going to cost?" And I remember taking a deep breath, looking at Robbie and going, "We think it's $1.15 billion, Steve." He said, "Do it."
Only a few months after Peter Moore refused to comment on failure rates, he put out an open letter addressing the issue.
To our Xbox community, you've spoken, and we've heard you. Good service and a good customer experience are areas of the business that we care deeply about. And frankly, we've not been doing a good enough job. If a customer has an issue indicated by the 3 flashing red lights, Microsoft will repair the console free of charge, including shipping, for 3 years from the console's purchase date. I want to thank you, on behalf of all us at Microsoft, for your loyalty. Fuck, my nuts are so fucking itchy, bro. Does anyone have any talcum powder? Oh, what? The speech-to-text is still going? It hasn't gone out, has it? Oh, okay. It only goes out when I say send.
This move is widely credited with saving the Xbox brand. Although the experience of sending off your Xbox was far from a pleasant one, the fact it was fully covered by Microsoft at least gave gamers the impression that they were doing something. Besides, people were hooked. Your only options as a console gamer were the Wii, which seemed more focused on catering to people who laugh at Facebook memes, or the PS3. Sony's Black Brick had yet to recover from its excessive price, bizarre marketing strategy, and infamously poor range of exclusives at launch. So you've probably spent this whole video wondering what the Red Ring of Death actually was. After years of silence, mostly because Microsoft themselves had no idea, they finally revealed its cause in 2021. In order to meet European regulations surrounding lead in products, Microsoft and their merry band of cohorts were forced to swap to a lead-free solder for their electronic parts. These solders connect the circuits on electrical components, making them crucial to the operation of the machine. The problem with removing lead from the equation is that the replacement alloy is nowhere near as flexible or tasty. This means, in an environment like the 360s, the constant fluctuations in temperature from being turned off and on again would cause the metal to expand and contract, like bending a piece of plastic or a Subway sandwich back and forth. Eventually, it would snap. The 360's original sleek, compact design left little room for solid airflow, which only exacerbated its heating issues. Now, it's possible that this wasn't exclusively because of the 360's rushed design, and instead thanks to good old-fashioned money grubbing. The broken solders primarily occurred in the graphics chip, one that Microsoft opted to design in-house instead of contracting an external vendor. This move might have saved them $10 million up front, only to cost them $1.15 billion down the line. Of course, the 360's rush design was still at fault for a myriad of issues outside the Red Ring of Death. While the Red Ring of Death was responsible for the majority of 360 meltdowns, its other malfunctions still occurred at a rate higher than both the PS3 and the Wii. Later versions of the 360 redesigned the internal components to allow for much greater airflow, which drastically reduced the likelihood of a Red Ring of Death. With Microsoft poised to release these new versions of the 360, as well as the groundbreaking launches of Halo 3 and Gears of War right around the corner, the future was bright for the console that almost didn't make it. So the next time you go to say that Xbox sucks or that Bill Gates should stop buying up farmland. Spare a thought for the poor multinational billion-dollar corporations who are just barely getting by. Oh, also the PlayStation 3 ended up winning. Yeah. Hey, don't forget to check out War Thunder for free on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation by using my link below. For a limited time, new players or those who haven't played in 6 months can claim multiple premium vehicles, 7 days of premium account, and much more. A huge thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Hey, if you like this video, check out this one about Bethesda and their many scandals.